Everybody. So I'm just going to do a quick demo of my scene, and I'll be sure to share the same file with y'all afterwards. But yeah, so just to kind of show off a couple things we did from yesterday, I know a lot of students will probably be making some butterfly or moth wings. There's a bunch of different ways you can go about it. I'll just show you one of my particular methods. And so the method that I used to create these two was actually using a plane. So I went to create polygon primitives and just a plain old plane, but I like to hit this little square button. So the default, this basically shows the different options. The default is width is 10 as well as height is 10. I moved it down to 4 just so I had less vertices to manipulate. I really recommend starting from a smaller kind of like topology and then building your way and adding more detail later. It'll save you in the long haul. So yeah, it was a little hard to see because it was under my mesh, but I'm going to move it over here. I'm going to scale it to about the right size. That's about what I would like. I'm hitting F to focus in on it. If you ever get lost with the camera, that's way to kind of like reorient yourself. And kind of just start things off, I just was going into vertex mode. So I right click and I went to vertex, and I've just been highlighting which vertices I want to move, and I've just been manually moving them. Actually, I'm going to undo that. So I'm doing Command Z. It's going to be a lot cleaner if I move into the top view. And so in here, it just moves the two axes, so I'm not moving in the Z direction. So I'm just kind of making my overall shape that I want to make for this little butterfly wing. And so a lot of it was just kind of moving these pieces around to get the general shape that I'd like. Moving this guy over. Let's actually, no, let's make this a little bit of a wider wing. There we go. Because I just don't want to have a completely straight edge because it makes it feel a lot less organic. Yeah, so if you out-click, you can just go back into vertex mode. So you got to keep clicking on the same mesh. All right, so that's about what I want to do. Another thing I like to do is I like to make sure my topology kind of follows the contours of my model. So like, that's feeling about right. I'm gonna move this guy over. Just really thinking about how the topology and the edge loops kind of influence the overall shape, especially let's say if we want to deform this wing. Having good topology helps with that. So this is about where I'd want everything to be topology wise. So it kind of follows a kind of particular flow. Let's actually move this guy back here. Yeah, I decided we're gonna kind of curve this wing in a little bit more. Just because I'm noticing some kind of like straight edges with it. Yeah. Moving that all down here. Okay, cool. So this is about the general kind of like idea I want my like wing to look like. But I want to add more detail. And so another method to go about adding detail, so I'm right clicking, going into object mode. You can go to mesh and smooth. So there's a lot of different kind of like levels. So if you want something to have a lot more divisions, you will adjust this number. There's different types. Catmull, Clark's open subdiv is a great way to start, and we're just going to hit smooth. So this added a bunch of edges in between. It uses an averaging program. So now we kind of have like a general wing shape. So I click off and I'm clicking back on because some of these edges I don't particularly like. If the hotkey to get to the translate tool is W, so I just press W, and now I'm just kind of going back and fixing a couple of these edges. Alrighty, so now I'm going to go back into perspective mode. And so with this, it's just a plane. So it's not completely ready to be animated. That's because this area is black. That means the normals are facing the wrong direction. So there's a couple ways we can make this three-dimensional. Kind of the quickest way to go into that is going into polygon modeling, and you can extrude. And so I highly recommend make sure you're extruding the correct direction. So this would be the correct direction. You notice everything is now nice and gray. That means the it's actually all one shape. This is just intersecting with that mesh. But let's say if we extrude it in the wrong direction, now we get all those opposite normals. So that's what you just have to be careful of when you're extruding. I just hit the undo button, and so now I'm finished. So that's one way we can go about this. I'm hitting undo. Another option we can utilize for this mesh, hitting undo till we get back to the beginning. And this is the more like the hard route to go about it, but this is what's actually all going on in theory. And so method number 2 is you can duplicate the mesh. So now I have 2 pieces of this plane. I'm moving one of them above. And so now you see we have 2 different surfaces, but we need to fill in the edges to make this 3-dimensional. I have both of these selected. You can select them by clicking one, holding down shift, and selecting the other one. I'm going into mesh and I'm combining. So now this is combining these all into one mesh. You'll notice in the outliner, they just show up as one object. And now I want to connect these edges. And so because they're all one object, I can select all the edges because they are now all together. So I'm double clicking to select all the edges on this particular piece, holding down shift, and double clicking to select these pieces. And so now I have my modeling toolkit open, and I'm going to use this component, which is bridge. Now you see we're getting some very interesting geometry pieces, so I must have messed up somewhere in particular. Not quite sure where that is, but I guess a better example, I know for sure this piece is ideal. So let me just quickly demo some duplicating, moving up. There we go. Let's do mesh, combine, edges. So I'm selecting all my edges, and now I'm going to hit bridge. Interesting. So there's something very strange going on here. Ideally, it's actually going to be connecting all of the pieces. So I'm hitting undo to go back to the start. I'm going to try something slightly different. Let's do duplicate again, but this time I'm actually going to go underneath. Cool. Da, da, da. Mesh, combine. Perfect. And so now we're going to select all these edges again, bridge. Okay. So I'm not quite sure what's going on. There's probably something in particular. This was working great while ago, but yeah, that just goes to show with Maya, you have a bunch of interesting little things that happen when you try to reconnect some of these. But yeah, in theory, this would be connecting all of the bridges. There's probably something going on with my options. But that being said, that's a couple of ways we can go about with making wings. But yeah, and so another thing I kind of wanted to show off is sculpting tools. So I'm going, for just an example, I'm going to go to Polygon Primitives and use a sphere. I'm going to move this over because I just want to use this to demo how we can create some more organic shapes. I'm using F to focus, making this slightly larger, focusing in again. In this case, I just want to add a lot more topology, so I use the smooth option. All right, cool. So now we have a nice, pretty sphere with some kind of dense topology. You can go to this tab, which is the sculpting tab. And so now we have all these lovely options of different sculpting brushes. So now I've selected, this is just the general sculpt tool. You'll notice that we have a giant brush and we don't want to have a giant brush. And so there's a couple ways we can go about fixing it. If you don't want to access the sculpting tools here, you can actually go into mesh tools, sculpting tools, and they are all right here as well. I like going here because actually this is the hotkey as well. So I can hit this tab and bring up the settings. So like right now the size is like huge. So let's bring that size down by a lot. And so just by pressing, I'm now adding some sculpting elements to this piece. You can adjust the strength. So let's say I don't want it to be as harsh of an object. So I would just recommend kind of like playing with the different settings. So if you want to kind of create more organic shapes, this is the route to go. So this is the smoothing tool. This is kind of can help kind of create, it's different from the actual smooth option, which actually creates more geometry. This kind of averages to almost like flatten the different pieces. You can also use the smooth brush if you have, let's say, some really gross topology to kind of help average everything out. Another great one to use is the grab tool. So if you just select and hold on, you can pull pieces apart like actual clay. So that's one way we can utilize this tool. Another good one to use is flatten. So let's say I don't like where this is going. If you want to have everything flatten in one direction, the flatten tool is great for that. Trying to think. Foamy is kind of like another slightly interesting brush. It's very similar to sculpting. So yeah, the strength on this is pretty high. So that's one way we can utilize. I would just recommend playing with the different brushes. Gives you kind of a more close to ZBrush experience in Maya. Another thing I want to show really quick is how to do the extra credit. So I'm going to open up a scene. And so this was the example where I was showing there was a look development rig on the Renderman website. You can download that. I highly recommend downloading it and moving it into your documents where you have your Maya folder and going all the way down to assets. So I placed it here. The entire file was called Studio. And the Maya scene is going all the way into scenes. And so I already have an example of that. So I'm going to double click to open that. And I'm not going to save this particular scene. All right, cool. So minus the WAS model, this is what appears when you actually have the look development rig. The camera has already been set up. If you don't have this color checker card, let's say it's like pink or it's missing the texture, you need to go actually into the, here we go. You'll actually have to go into the actual surfacing. So this is a Pixar surface. I'll cover more about this next week. And you're probably going to have to reattach this color by clicking this button and finding this, the TIFF file, which actually would contain the color checker material. But besides that, the scene should be pretty much ready to go. You can import your model into the scene. So you can do File, import your FBX or OBJ of your model and bring it into the scene. You can render with Lambert. I highly recommend utilizing either a blend, a Phong, or a Pixar surface. So in this case, I've selected my whole model. You can right-click, go to Assign New Material. If you have Renderman downloaded, you can use the Renderman materials. If not, Blend or Phong is great in this case. I'll show you how we can do a Pixar surface. So I'm selecting, so this, I have a bunch of different Pixar surfaces in this team. So this is number 10. I'm just going to slightly make this a little bit darker of a texture. And I recommend going into this rough specular. And this is where we can adjust some of these settings. So in this case, let's actually see how this renders. So if you have Renderman properly set up, you can actually go to here to the renderer and do Renderman. This shows you exactly in the viewport what Renderman's going to look like. It may take a bit depending on your computer. See, I have the object selected, so I'm going to unselect off of that. And that is your model. And so this is a great way to do and just check to see if everything's working correctly. If your computer gets really slow, I recommend just going back into viewport number 2. And so if you're ready to just render a particular scene, you just hit this little button, which is render the current frame. Anything in particular, we can go into render settings, but we'll get pretty much what you have for the default is all you need for the extra credit. If nothing is showing up right away, you can hit R to render. It may take a little bit for it to upload, so you just got to give it a little bit of time. Let's see. There we go. Oh, must have canceled on me. Trying to hit the IT button to bring it back up. If not, we can bring up the IPR. Okay. Here we go. Give it a second. Here we go. Cool. And so I recommend just letting this sit for a little bit. So it's going to be rendering out. You see how it's calculating all the different light in the scene. And whenever you're ready and you think this is a good enough render, you can right click, File, and export your file. And that's all that's really needed. I highly recommend using either a JPEG, PNG, In actuality, we'll probably be using TIFFs for your final classes, but just so I can view it quickly on Canvas, a PNG or TIFF is fine. Yeah, and so I don't want to save this in particular. I'll be sure to share this model with y'all so y'all can just see a really good example or an okay example. This is about kind of the complexity I'm imagining for this class, but if anybody has any questions, let me know and I can record another demo.